Hey everyone, welcome to the Herd and 10 podcast. I'm your host, Jake Fortinsky, joined by my brother, as always, Kevin Fortinsky. This is a hard one. The Bills lost, and it was disgusting. Not a lot of good things, really. Not a lot of silver linings here. I like on this show to always find something good to talk about, try to find some positive so that we can move forward in a healthy manner. But if that's why you're here today listening, I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm going to make you feel better because the Bills are in a bit of tricky position here. This was a season that was Super Bowl or bust. At the very least, making the Super Bowl. And we were very far from it. It's one thing to lose in the divisional round, it's happened to us before. It's another thing to not even come close to winning in the divisional round. The Buffalo Bills were nowhere near the level of the Cincinnati Bengals. It wasn't even close. I don't think the score was close, but if you felt like the score was close, I can tell you right now, that game was over within the first few minutes. And there's a whole lot of blame to go around. Kevin and I are going to go through that. I got to start by saying this. Everything is going to be okay. The Buffalo Bills are still a very good team. They will still go to the playoffs next season and probably the year after that. But this idea of us being a Super Bowl favorite, I think, is gone. I think this was the season that we were the favorite for good reason. I don't think that's going to be the case anymore. I think now we're entering a situation where we're probably going to be near the top in the conference, but I don't think anyone's going to take us that seriously in the playoffs until we prove otherwise. Because we have not shown that we belong in the AFC Championship, and we certainly have not shown that we belong in the Super Bowl. And for good reason. The Buffalo Bills have not shown up in the playoffs the way we've expected them to. Last season, the Buffalo Bills looked amazing in the playoffs. Josh Allen looked incredible. This year, not so much. Now, this playoff loss, the one thing I can certainly tell you is this does not fall on Josh Allen's shoulders. This game was not his fault. He did everything he possibly could with the very little that the Buffalo Bills organization gave Josh Allen and this offense. We thought that they gave him a good offense, although we know throughout the season there were issues. It's just, I don't think any of us realized quite how glaring they were. Let's start with this, Kev. Let's start with the coaching staff. Let's start with the concerns there. I know you have a lot of question marks to place on the heads of the coaching staff. So why don't we start with, I think we need to start with the defense and Leslie Frazier.
Yeah, I, like most of you Bills fans, had a rough day. I was not happy. I was snappy at the people around me. And I just did not feel like getting up in the morning. I didn't feel like putting a smile on my face. It was a rough day. Tomorrow and the next day, this depression will start to get better as the off season sinks in. It's going to be a long off season. I don't necessarily want to start with the defensive coordinator. I will get to him quite quickly. But I will say this is the first time in the McDermott era where I've questioned whether he's the coach to win us the Super Bowl. Before this game, I was pretty high on McDermott throughout his tenure as our head coach. I think he is a very good coach, but is he a great coach who can win us the Super Bowl? I just don't know. I thought he was, but today I am not so sure. The Bills did not come out ready to play for that game. We hadn't seen that in really close to 2 years. We lost a combined 3 games in the season this year by 8 total points. Last season, we got blasted a couple times. We had a close exit in the playoffs last year where, we definitely had many chances to win that game and didn't. This year, against Cincinnati, we did not look competitive. We looked like a team who wasn't mentally focused, wasn't physically focused, and I put a lot of blame on the coaching staff for that. Why did we not look ready to play the first play of the game? We didn't look ready. I blame a lot of that on the coaching staff. Has to start with the head coach. He's the leader. Why were we not focused coming into that game? I'm going to try to contain my anger, but it's very difficult. I knew this podcast would be a bit of a rant. We can move down from there.
Yeah, let me comment on the Sean McDermott stuff because it's kind of scary that we got to talk about this because we do. You're right. We need to talk about McDermott probably before anything else. I guess my biggest issue with it is if he's not the guy, if you're right, and it's hard to argue it at this point because this was the biggest game in a long time for the Buffalo Bills, and they didn't look mentally ready to play, and that falls on Sean McDermott more than anyone else. A part of me feels, and I feel like this is something that's gonna keep coming up, but Damar Hamlin, I think we hoped that it would galvanize the team, but I think it did the opposite. I think this team took a step back with everything that happened to him. I know that a part of them wanted to be positive and say, we're going to do this for Damar, but it's something that has never happened before in the NFL. It's something that no team should have to go through with. It's something that a team probably will never have to deal with. It's adversity that an NFL team will probably never go through. The key to this is that it's something that's completely out of our control, but I do think that maybe played a part in this. That a part of the team just wasn't quite as focused as they needed to be because they had Damar on their minds. And let's not forget last week, okay? We won by the skin of our teeth against a team that we were so much better than. It wasn't even close. We played Skylar Thompson, the Miami Dolphins' third-string quarterback who had barely played, 1 or 2 games in his entire career in the NFL. Nobody. Drafted in the 7th round, and he almost beat us. He looked really good. And our defense did not look particularly good. Our offense was up and down in that game. And then we go up against the Cincinnati Bengals, who are a much better team. Clearly better than us, which I don't think anyone anticipated. I think that it comes back to that. Yes, we had the 2 kick returns for Nyheim Hines final week of the season against the Patriots. But after that, don't forget, the Bills went real quiet in that game too. So it was the third game in a row, in my opinion, that the Bills didn't look right. Since DeMar's injury, the Bills did not look right. Now, it is McDermott's job to get us ready, and he didn't do it. No question, he must be blamed. Now, should he be fired? I don't think he should be fired yet. Is he the guy to take us to the Super Bowl? I know, honestly, at this point, I don't know. I thought he was the guy. Now I would say I'm kind of caught between, I would say it's 50-50 for me. It could go easily either way, and I it's crazy to say this, but I think he has one more year. I think if he doesn't get we don't improve from this season, if we don't look better next year, not during the season, whatever. We got to make the playoffs, no question. But if we do something like this in the playoffs again, I think he's gone.
I
personally think he's gone.
I agree. If we don't take a step in the right direction, and to me, that is probably at the very least making the Super Bowl, or maybe if you lose the conference championship, I don't know. Like, the thing is, do these guys need a new voice in the room at some point if we don't get there another season? I just don't know. I'm hoping we can do it next year, and I agree with you. We were hoping the DeMar Hamlin thing would galvanize the team, but I think, to me, especially in the game yesterday, they looked mentally finished. I don't even think it was a physical thing. You looked at the team, and it just looked like they were mentally done. Like, it took so much out of them mentally, how upsetting of a situation it was. They just didn't have the mental energy to get themselves in that game, because we have not seen the Bills play like that literally in years. I haven't seen them where they made no effort. But to me, part of the reason, and this was a massive problem in the game, our defensive scheme was absolutely atrocious. From the first play of the game, we didn't stop anything. And yes, mentally, our players just didn't seem into it quite enough. But the scheme of playing zone in a snow game where you're just letting guys roam free pretty much everywhere along the field, and also inexplicably not stopping any of the runs, but that's besides the point. Burrow had all day. There were massive holes through our defensive line, and we didn't cover anyone. I'm not sure how you can win a game when your scheme is a plan to not cover anyone. Then we started playing some more man-to-man, and all of a sudden, we can cover a bit better, at least give us a chance. The beginning of the game, though, completely demoralized our team. And I think we've seen enough in the playoffs where our defense can't stop anyone, to the point of, okay, Leslie Frazier has got to go. This is not an option at this point. We've seen meltdown after meltdown on defense in the last 3 years of the playoffs. Whether you like the guy or not is irrelevant at this point. To me, Leslie Frazier has, if you're not firing the head coach, which I don't think the Bills are, there is no choice but to fire the defensive coordinator. You may want to consider firing Ken Dorsey as well. But the way Josh Allen talks about Dorsey, how much he likes him, I think this would be counterproductive. I think Dorsey was good this season, definitely not great. There's room for improvement. This was his first year calling plays. If you delve into the statistics, we were quite similar offensively this year as we were last year. I think that Ken Dorsey hopefully will progress as a play caller, have a bit better feel for the game. Like, I thought we should have started running the ball earlier last game to give our O-line a chance when they were just roasted throughout the first quarter or two for sure. Our O-line looked absolutely atrocious in the game. And we'll get into, personnel issues for sure later on in the show. But I'm going to focus here on the coaching. To me, no brainer. Leslie Frazier has to go. That's 100%. This should go down fairly quickly. He has to be gone because at the very least, he's shown he can't come up with a game plan to stop the top QBs in the league. We saw Baltimore stop top QBs. We've seen Cincinnati stop top QBs. We've seen Kansas City be able to stop top QBs when it matters the most. And we have seen Leslie Frazier's complete inability to even slow down the top QBs in the league. He doesn't even come close. The only guys he's been able to stop are these middle-of-the-road quarterbacks. I don't think I'd consider Lamar Jackson a top QB. He's been able to stop him, but Burrow, Mahomes, even Aaron Rodgers in season, we've seen us get toasted. Obviously, Brady at times. Like, this is the point where you have to change up your game plan for the top QBs, not play the same old defense of sit back and hope you make a play or hope the other team makes a mistake. That doesn't work. Frazier has to go within the next week. Decision on Ken Dorsey. To me, he gets a pass for this season. First season calling plays. I think you keep him. I think you probably give McDermott another year as well. See what happens. But, O-line needs a change. I think our offensive line coach, that's a no-brainer as well to make a change. I thought our O-line took a huge step back this season. It was a major, major problem. And otherwise, yeah, we'll get into the personnel. Maybe you have some more comments, Jake, about coaches.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt, Leslie Frazier, he did this last year. We lost against the Kansas City Chiefs. We all know why we lost. We lost because our defense was unable to make a stop with 13 seconds left. And then, didn't make a stop the entire game. And then, of course, couldn't stop them in overtime. So, it's pretty obvious at this point. Leslie Frazier and the defense struggled mightily. This is nothing new. We've seen them struggle against top-tier quarterbacks. It's crazy to me that Sean McDermott could allow us to go into the game thinking we're going to play zone against Joe Burrow with the receiving core that he has. It's mind-boggling. It truly is mind-boggling. I don't understand it. I don't know how you allow a team with a top-tier quarterback, one of the best in the league, just have guys wide open, and I mean wide open. They were catching the ball 3-4 yards from the scrimmage line, and then they were running for 8-9 yards with no one there. They'd get tackled after gaining 12 yards. I can't say I haven't seen it before. I have seen it from this Bills defense. I've seen it before. We haven't seen it in a while, but we've seen it. We saw the same crap last season in the playoffs, and part of me thought we should fire Leslie Frazier then. You blow it 13 seconds left. The game was over, and we blew it because of our defense. And then you go and you do the same thing again. I just don't understand how you expect a different outcome. It's just stupidity. So to me, obvious. Yeah, I don't think McDermott's going anywhere, especially because if you fire McDermott, you're almost restarting again. The Bills, they're not in rebuild mode. Yes, we have a lot of things that we need to fix, but we're obviously still a good team. Like, that's the one thing we can hang on to. We know we're going to be really good. It's not that I don't think we're going to be really good. I just don't know if we're elite when it comes to the playoffs. I think we're elite in the season because you're playing lots of teams that don't make the playoffs. But when it comes to the playoffs, are we an elite playoff team? Probably not. We rely so much on Josh Allen, which I know a lot of the teams now rely heavily on their quarterbacks. But look at Cincinnati. Okay, their defense showed up. They got pressure on Josh Allen. So there's some other pieces that are helping. Josh was completely on his own. I need to just make it very clear. For all this nonsense about hating on Josh Allen, it's ridiculous. Josh Allen had pretty much the identical numbers from last season. I have it right in front of me, okay? Last season, he played 17 games. This year, 16 games, okay? His completion percentage was identical, 63.3%. Passing yards, almost the same, about 100 yards different. 4,400 versus roughly 4,300. He had 36 passing touchdowns last year. He had 35 this year. He had 15 interceptions last year and 14 this year. And people are saying he's a turnover machine. He had less turnovers this year than last year. He had a significantly better passer rating this year of a 96.6 versus last year of 92.2. However, he did take 33 sacks this year, and last year he only took 26, which to me falls exactly in line with what you're saying, which is our offensive line took a step backwards. No question about that. So the fact that Josh Allen's stats are identical to last year, I would argue that they're better because he had a better passer rating. He did that with a significantly worse offensive line. So I would argue that Allen was better this year. So this idea that he's not consistent or that he's regressing is complete nonsense. Josh Allen is an elite quarterback. He's a top 2, top 3 quarterback in this NFL. That is not the reason why we lost. We lost because we didn't show up. Our defense did absolutely nothing. And the game plan in terms of creativity on the offensive side of the ball was also basically non-existent. Honestly, and this comes down to exactly the other question, which is, what do you do with the coach on the offensive side of the ball? You obviously said you feel like Ken Dorsey should get a pass. Our offense was pretty much the same as last season. I agree. I think you have to give him one more year, just for the plain reason that if you fire both of your coordinators, you're really kind of taking a step backwards. And that's not the goal here. The goal is we're trying to make a few tweaks, and hopefully that gives us just enough to take that step forward. To me, a small tweak is firing the defensive coordinator because our defense looks like crap anyways. I honestly don't think they could have been worse. It was the worst outing I've seen. Honestly, it was one of the worst defensive performances I've seen in my entire life. There was just no effort, no shits given. The only guy that cared on the field in that game was Matt Milano. And it's not the first time we've seen that where he's pretty much the only guy that does anything. I mean, we got to talk about this as well. There was only 3 pressures on Joe Burrow the entire game. 3. When they were missing, I think 3 offensive linemen, and their center hurt his ankle in the game and couldn't move properly. And we still only had 3 pressures and 1 sack. This is for a team, let's be clear, that spent over $100 million on their defensive line, that said that the defensive line has got to be the star of the show. Not Josh Allen, not the offense. We need to make sure that our defensive line is incredible, that we have 10 defensive linemen that we interchange so they don't get tired. Well, sorry, Sean. The defense looked exhausted. No one looked like they were rolling. Where was Greg Rousseau? He's a ghost. He was a ghost. Shaq Lawson, every time he makes a play, he's going crazy, slamming the field. He did nothing. Jordan Phillips, nothing. Where's Ed Oliver at? I thought he's this high draft pick. He's finally going to break out. He's so good. It doesn't matter that he's undersized. It doesn't matter that he's inconsistent. Well, guess what? He was crap, and the defensive line was a joke. Okay, the Cincinnati Bengals had a horrific offensive line, and they looked like the best offensive line in the league. You want to know how many yards they had per carry last game? 5.1 yards a carry. They didn't even need to throw the ball. They could have just run the whole game and they would have won. That's a joke. That should not happen. Again, I don't think we have an elite defense. Like, let's be clear. I didn't think we had an elite defense, especially without Trey White for the majority of the season. But I thought we had a competent defense. And to me, it's very clear that there's player personnel issues, but the main problem in all of this is the scheme. I don't think Dane Jackson is the worst cornerback in the league. I don't think he's the best either, but I don't think he's the worst. I don't think Kyrie Elam's the worst. I don't think Trey White is the worst, although he wasn't as good this season. I don't think any of the guys I named are the worst defensive linemen. But the scheme does not work for this player personnel. It just doesn't work. It worked when we had Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer and everyone was healthy. It doesn't work when you don't have the same safety play. You can't sit back because we don't have the guys to take the ball away. Trey White, not the same guy right now after his ACL tear. Not a surprise. I don't think anyone thought he was going to come back and be incredible, but he's certainly not the same guy. So I think that mainly the issue is coaching staff. However, we do need to talk a little bit about player personnel and how we deal with this, as well as an obvious elephant in the room, which you and I talked about before the playoffs. The organization, the coaching staff seems to have issues with rookie players. They don't give them a chance. Why did you draft Kyrie Elam in the first round? The guy barely played. Why? I like, Kev, you got an answer for us? I mean,
it's very upsetting because they did the same thing on the offense. You draft James Cook high, and then you don't play him. He has one fumble to start his career, and then he just didn't play enough. Like, to me, the NFL is for young guys to come in and play immediately. That is the way it works. You need that young blood to energize the roster. We have drafted quite poorly recently, whether it be we're not developing them well or we're just picking the wrong guys. But in the last 3-4 years, Bean has been missing more than he's been hitting. Like you said, we've drafted numerous guys along the D-line. They were all playing in that game. Didn't notice any of them. Ed Oliver, useless. Greg Rousseau, useless. Boogie Basham, useless. AJ Epineza, useless. These are all guys drafted in the top 2 rounds. You had 4 guys along the D-line drafted in the top 2 rounds, and all you're talking about is how we desperately need Von Miller. Drafted 4 guys in the top 2 rounds, and not one of them was even decent in that game. We couldn't stop the run, couldn't get any pressure, 0. And then you look at the back end. I thought Poyer had a terrible game. He was blowing coverages left and right. Jamar Chase, I saw that. Jamar Chase was open by 8 yards on his touchdown pass. He had 25 career touchdowns. That was the most he's ever been open on a touchdown pass. There was no one within 8 yards. 8 yards. You have guys who are apparently leaders of your defense. Tremaine Edmonds, Jordan Poyer, Trey White. Nobody in the vicinity of anyone the entire game, really. Basically, we didn't make a play on defense all game. No one. So, to me, you need to sign Jordan Poyer, Tremaine Edmonds. No, we don't. They're useless. You need to beef up the O-line for Josh Allen. He's running for his life on every play. This is an offensive league now. I know Sean McDermott is a defensive coach. He loves the D-line. This is not a defensive team. You have a top 3 quarterback in the league. You have to spend on protecting him. We should have drafted an offensive lineman in the first round last year. You drafted Kyrie Elam, who you didn't even play, like you said. You played Dane Jackson over him, who couldn't cover anyone. And you still played him over Elam. It was honestly a mind-boggling game. I don't want to put an overemphasis on this one game, but we've had chances to make the Super Bowl for 3 straight years, and we couldn't do it. Clearly, our defense can't do it in the big moments. They need our offense to be what it needs to be. And in order to do that, you have to protect Allen. And again, we've seen misses on the O-line as well, both signings and through the draft. Spencer Brown, 4th-round pick. He was horrendous. He was horrendous all season. He was horrendous in the game. Even Dion Dawkins, your star left tackle, was absolutely atrocious against Cincinnati. He was getting beat clean. And this isn't the first time. I don't think he had a very good season. I think he was actually pretty terrible overall. Maybe middle of the road. Maybe. But not good enough. You need Dion Dawkins to get back to playing at a high level. He's never going to be elite, but at least at a high level. And then you're going to need an elite guard beside him or somebody elite on this O-line. We have no elite O-linemen. Roger Saffold at left guard was pathetic. That signing was horrendous. He's not a good player. This was your key signing on your O-line this year. He was worse than what we had before. Ryan Bates, last year looked good on the left side. This year did not look good on the right side at all. Whether that's because Spencer Brown stinks beside him, I don't know. But we have multiple holes on this O-line, and we don't need just average play. You want to win the Super Bowl, you need elite play at the O-line positions.
Yeah, even with a guy like Josh Allen, you do. You need a great offensive line if your goal is to make it and win the Super Bowl. Very, very difficult to do that without a good offensive line. I don't think we've seen it in a long time. We look at the past bunch of Super Bowl winners. They've all had really good offensive lines and really good quarterbacks and very elite offenses. I can't agree more. I think this idea that you need, and you and I talked about this yesterday after the game, the Bills are trying so hard to have a great defense and a great offense so that they have this perfect blend and they go and win the Super Bowl. We all know that that's not going to happen. It's very, very rare that you have everything running perfectly. In this new age, you have to have a great offense and a competent defense. That means spending very little on the defense and hoping that they can do enough, and spending everything on the offense and just blowing the other team out. That is the way you win in this day and age. And the only way you're going to do it next year is drafting offensive players, signing offensive players. Forget about the defense. Like, just forget about it. It doesn't mean the defense has to be awful. But this idea of us spending lots of money on the defense, like, those days should be over. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, post-game, on Buffalo Fanatics, the Rico Report. And they're talking about how the Bills need to double down on the defense. That the defense wasn't good, and we need to bring in more defensive linemen. Have we not learned that it doesn't work? We've been doing this for years. How many years have we seen our defense just blow the season because we've spent so much money and so much time and effort on them, and then we lose because we can't put enough points up or the other team just puts up a ton of points on us and it's over and it makes no difference. And Josh Allen is running for his life. This isn't the first time. Right now, it's a simple game plan. I'm just going to recap before we end this episode. Number one priority. In the next week, you fire Leslie Frazier and you scrap that whole scheme of the nonsense of zone, okay? And relying on 1,000 defensive linemen where they each play 3 snaps a game so they can run at full speed. Let's just throw that and burn it behind the barn. You stop playing Dane Jackson. Like, the guy is, what, a 7th round pick? Who's not any good? Okay, scrap it, throw it in behind the barn. You hope, okay, Trey White, that he comes back and he's okay. You hope Micah Hyde's healthy, he's okay. Jordan Poyer, probably gone. Not because he's not a good player, but because he's at the end of his career and it's going to cost too much money. Scrap him. Let him go somewhere else. Tremaine Edmonds, scrap him. He's a average linebacker. And again, as I've said now many times, stop spending on the defense. So let him go. You can bring in any middle of the road linebacker. You don't need a great linebacker. You have Matt Milano, who's elite. The guy is one of the best linebackers in the league. As long as you give him something to work with, he can get by. To be honest, AJ Klein didn't look bad when he played this year. I wouldn't mind signing him again, just on a 1-year deal, $2 million. I think I would be fine with that. Taron Johnson, you still roll with him. He's a solid slot cornerback. You don't draft anyone on the D-line anymore. Okay? If you want to bring in a couple veterans, cheap money, no problem. Obviously, Von Miller is a great player. He'll be back hopefully next year. Hopefully, he'll be healthy. No concern there. But then you go into the draft and you draft offensive linemen. Honestly, at least the first and second round.
And a receiver. And a receiver.
And a receiver. Obviously, so you got at least 2 offensive linemen that you have to draft. I would say 2 in the first 3 rounds. No question. And the other pick needs to be a receiver. And it can't be a small, fast receiver. We don't need another slot, undersized guy. I want a real wideout. Because Gabe Davis is not that. We know that. Gabe Davis is a very good wide receiver 3. He's not really a wide receiver 2. At least he didn't appear to be in this season. You, of course, have Stephon Diggs. You have Josh Allen. That's all the same. Running back situation, you're probably letting Devin Singletary go unless he's willing to sign for very little. I don't think he's a bad player. I just don't think he makes us really any better. I think we're the same team with or without him. So if he wants to play, he's got to sign a minimum deal for like $1 million, maybe $2 million for a 1-year contract. I'll give it to him, but that's about it. I will say it's funny, at the beginning of this episode, I said there was no silver lining. There is one. I thought Dawson Knox looked really good in the playoffs, actually. He had a good playoffs. He looked good in the game. He was kind of the only player that did anything. Gabe Davis, atrocious. His drop was part of the reason why we lost. He's wide open on a third down. It goes right through his hands. I don't have an explanation for it. The only thing I can say, the only comfort I can give is that he's been doing it all year, so it's nothing new. It's not like he was amazing and then all of a sudden he dropped it. He's been trouble the entire season, and he had one good game this year, which was last week. He looked really good. And then this game, he was okay, and then he obviously had that horrendous drop.
Maybe he'll refocus and come back strong next year. Hopefully, I guess we'll have to wait and see. News just came out also today that Cole Beasley wants to come back with the Bills. He's interested. I would probably be willing to sign him on a veteran minimum contract.
And I would let Isaiah McKenzie go.
Yeah, McKenzie stinks. He was atrocious this season. I think Khalil Shakir is good enough, definitely to have a bigger role moving forward. I like Beasley in the slot as a sort of, playing maybe 25-30% of the downs if you're going to sign him as a veteran minimum. When you need a first down, I thought he actually looked pretty good. And he picked up a bit where he left off. I think he still has something left. To me, Cole Beasley should be back. Tight end, we might need to add there. Quentin Morris, not much to talk about there.
He had a bad penalty.
Yeah, Dawson Knox did look good, but yeah, we need a good blocking tight end, especially if we're willing to go in the season again with this crappy of an offensive line. You need to be able to block. So again, that became maybe the biggest problem of the entire game. If we would be able to block for Allen, we would have had a chance in that game, but there was no blocking to speak of.
Question for you, Kev. The last question, then we will wrap this up. But why didn't we use Reggie Gilliam more in the game? I don't know what the snap count was, but if we were struggling so much with blocking, we have a guy who's a fullback. Why don't we bring him in to help block?
hard to talk about this game. We've been ranting and ranting. I don't really have an answer. It just seems like we didn't even try anything in that game. We got down early and we basically gave up. It looked to me like we made no effort to adjust. We didn't even try to block for Allen. Guys were screaming around the edge the whole game. And we're just like, okay, maybe Allen will get away and make a miracle out of it. That was basically what happened from start to finish, where literally right off the bat on third down, I think it was Saffold just didn't bother blocking his guy. Second drive, Deion Dawkins didn't bother blocking his guy. Should they have sent someone in to chip on the edge? Definitely. Should they have double teamed? Definitely. Should they have brought Reggie Gilliam to block? Definitely. Should Singletary have sat there all game blocking? Yes. Did they do anything to try and stop the pass rush? No. They just let them continue to tee off on Allen. It was an embarrassing effort, and I hope this will be a turning point for the Bills to invest in their O-line and hopefully through the draft, and hopefully we'll hit on those picks. We badly need a game changer at guard and at tackle, frankly, but especially at guard. We haven't put any draft capital in at guard, and the minimal capital we've put in 6th, 7th round, they haven't even stuck on the roster even for their first season. So I'm hoping that the veteran minimal signings at O-line is going to change, and we're going to put some draft picks there because it hasn't worked.
And that's the one last thing, I should bring up is that does fall on Ken Dorsey. I hope that he's humbled by this because throughout the season, he was kind of cocky, thinking this was just easy as pie. You put in Josh Allen and you let him just make miracles every single week. And I hope that Ken Dorsey learns from this that there's a hell of a lot more to being an offensive coordinator than going empty when your offensive line can't cover. Because we did that quite a bit yesterday, where we just went empty. And you had 5 receivers out, and you expect Josh to just do everything. You expect him to run past everyone when, by the way, they had QB spies pretty much the entire game. That's something we should remember. They handled Josh incredibly well. They didn't let him run anywhere. I mean, he had one drive where he ran a few times, but again, no big runs, no big 20-plus yard runs. They contained him all game, so we should have figured that out immediately. And running plays where you have an empty set, you got no one helping Josh but himself. You can't ask that of him. Josh Allen is one of the most respectful quarterbacks I've ever seen. He never outs anyone on his team, never throws anyone under the bus. But to be honest, I think at this point he's allowed to say, hey, our offensive line is not good enough. You need to give me more. Because he's never said anything like that, even though Josh, since he's come in, has had a middle-of-the-road to mediocre offensive line protecting him. He's never once complained. He's never once bitched. To be honest, I think this is his time to do so. If he wants to go to the coaches, if he wants to go to Brandon Beane and management and say, look, you paid me big money. You want me to take you to the Super Bowl. You want me to do everything. You want me to run for 700-800 yards a year. You want me to throw for 4,000+ yards. You need to protect me. I'm sick and tired of you signing guys on the defense.
And a balanced attack. That's part of the O-line. You have to have a balanced attack. You have to be able to run the ball. And you can't run the ball when your O-line is creating no holes. So to me, it's a two-pronged thing. If you're able to bring in proper linemen, you'll be able to run the ball. You'll be able to protect for Allen, and he'll be able to throw better. The play action will work better. We didn't really try to run the ball yesterday, and It ended up with them just teeing off on Allen all game. Didn't work out.
So, to everyone listening, we are going to end by saying this. The Buffalo Bills have a lot of stuff to figure out, but everything's going to be okay. The Buffalo Bills are a very good team. I've said this now already during the show. They are a very good team. They will continue to be very good. However, the days of us being a favorite to win the Super Bowl are over. Doesn't mean we can't win a Super Bowl, but the things that Kevin and I have talked about have to happen. You have to fire the defensive coordinator. You have to change your focus from a defensive-minded focus to an offensive-minded focus. There's actually one other thing that I will leave everyone with to think about, and that is, does Sean McDermott take over defensive calling? He's done it before, and it's worked. Do you hire a defensive coordinator that maybe doesn't have as much experience, that can learn from McDermott, that can listen to McDermott, but really let Sean McDermott run the defense? Let Ken Dorsey run the offense with hopefully a bolstered offensive line, a bolstered run game, and a bolstered receiving core. So spend a lot of draft capital and salary cap if you have on the offense, and let Sean McDermott run the defense with a younger defensive coordinator that can learn under McDermott. That, to me, is how we should move forward, and I will leave that with our listeners to think and mull over until the draft. Until then, Kevin and I are going to be off now for a while, so if you have questions, if anything, you can tweet at us, you can Instagram message us, you can Facebook message our show. If you got questions, concerns, you just want to vent, we can vent as well. So we will see you all next season, and we will end by saying what we always say, although it's kind of in a sad way, a depressing way, but go Bills.
Go Bills.